Elon Musk reveals what's really coming in October. Elon Musk's voice came through clear and direct, carrying the tone of someone who had lived with visions bigger than nations and dared to see beyond ordinary limitations. The future, he began, is not something that happens to us. It's something we either shape or surrender. October is not just another month on the calendar, it's the beginning of a wave that will redefine how humanity thinks about energy, space, technology, and destiny itself. The message I share with you today isn't about hype. It's about preparing for what is already coming. That opening struck like a tremor across the imagination. October had always been a month wrapped in mystery, with shifting seasons, longer shadows, and whispers of endings and beginnings. But when Musk framed it as the launch pad of a transformative wave, it carried a new gravity. His words did not sound like an entrepreneur selling a product, they rang like a visionary revealing a glimpse of something larger, something that could not be stopped. The room was quiet when he paused, as though space itself was listening. There was weight in his pauses, and within them you could almost hear the hum of engines that had not yet been built but were already alive in his mind. The kind of silence that happens when you sense that a truth is about to unfold. And so began the revelation of October, not a forecast of weather or a routine quarterly update, but a disclosure of what Musk believed humanity was standing on the edge of. It wasn't simply about rockets or electric cars. It was about a convergence, a point in history where hidden threads came together to weave something new, something no one could ignore. He leaned forward, his eyes steady, the kind of gaze that makes people uncomfortable because it holds more certainty than most can handle. "You've heard me talk about Mars, about AI, about clean energy," he said. "But October will be the beginning of something different. You could call it an unveiling, but not of a product, of a reality that most people aren't ready for. Some will dismiss it. Some will fight it. But those who understand will realize it's the most important transition humanity has ever faced." The phrase hung in the air, the most important transition humanity has ever faced. No one moved. Because if Musk was serious, and his tone was the tone of someone who rarely spoke without intention, then October wasn't about market launches or new gadgets. It was about the shape of civilization itself. And that was only the beginning. Imagine standing at a crossroads where the familiar dissolves into the unknown, and every step forward takes you into a landscape no one has mapped. That was the vision Musk carried when he spoke of October. It was not a simple moment in time, it was the ignition point of something larger, a cascade of consequences set into motion by years of preparation, vision, and relentless pursuit. In his explanation, October became symbolic, a threshold. One that signified humanity crossing from a world built on outdated systems to one where the impossible would no longer be optional, but necessary. Musk described it as though the month itself had been chosen, not by markets or governments, but by history. Energy, transportation, communication, these are the three pillars of civilization, he said. And all three are being rewritten right now. October is when people will begin to see that the old systems can no longer carry the weight of what's coming. The cracks will be obvious. But so will the solutions. It was a strange mixture of warning and promise. He wasn't predicting collapse in the sense of chaos, but collapse in the sense of transformation, like a caterpillar dissolving before becoming a butterfly. Painful, confusing, even terrifying to watch, but necessary if evolution was to take place. And in his voice was that mixture of conviction and mystery, the sense that he knew more than he was saying, but enough to ignite curiosity and urgency. The narrative of October, as Musk painted it, wasn't simply about events that would happen on specific dates. It was about awareness shifting. It was about humanity realizing that what we once thought of as the future was now arriving without permission, faster than anyone expected. He spoke of satellites linking the globe in real time, of artificial intelligence moving from being tools to becoming collaborators, of electric vehicles no longer being luxury alternatives but survival necessities. He spoke of the growing recognition that Earth itself was fragile, and that looking toward Mars was not escapism, but insurance for survival. But the most striking thing was the way he tied it together, weaving each thread into one grand pattern. October was not about SpaceX alone, or Tesla alone, or Neuralink or Starlink. It was about convergence, the moment when separate projects became interconnected, forming a web that would define what humanity was capable of in the next decade. If you think October is just a date on the calendar, you're missing it, he said. It's not about the month. It's about the awakening. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That was the spark. The story now unfolds like a river gathering speed. With each word, Musk pulled back the curtain further, revealing not just technological advancements, but the underlying forces shaping humanity's next chapter. And it became clear that October was not a singular event, but a threshold into a different kind of existence. He spoke of the hidden fears that governments didn't want to admit, of the quiet preparations companies were making for supply chain shifts, for environmental impacts, for artificial intelligence pushing beyond the boundaries of what was safe. He spoke of whispers that most people dismissed as rumors, but which were in fact signals, signs of a deeper truth waiting to break through. And as he spoke, the sense of suspense thickened. October was no longer a date, it was a doorway. That was only part of his message. What followed was even stranger, more layered. Musk began to speak not only as an engineer and entrepreneur, but as a man aware of history's tides, aware of the fragility of civilizations that had come before. He referenced Rome, the Industrial Revolution, the space race, not as distant events, but as echoes, patterns repeating. Civilizations always believe they're permanent, he said. But permanence is an illusion. Every civilization before us thought the same. Then came the turning points. The collapses. The revolutions. The discoveries. October is one of those moments for us. Not the end, but the point of no return. And in that moment, it felt less like a speech and more like prophecy. The weight of his words lingered in the room like a vibration. People were silent, not because they had nothing to say, but because they sensed that whatever was being revealed was not something to casually respond to. October, Musk had implied, was not just about a new product launch or a technological milestone. It was about something that reached beyond business, beyond industry, and into the very structure of reality humanity had built for itself. He continued, almost as if he could feel the collective anticipation hanging in the air. There are three kinds of people, he said, his voice steady, deliberate. Those who ignore change, those who resist change, and those who create change. October will make it clear which group each of us belongs to. The sentence hit hard. It wasn't just a statement, it was a challenge. It was as though he had drawn an invisible line in the sand, forcing everyone to consider where they stood. Were they blind to what was coming, clinging desperately to the past, or daring enough to step into the unknown and build the future? That was when he leaned back slightly, his gaze unfixed, almost as if he were watching images in his mind that hadn't yet been born into reality. And in that gaze was something haunting, a sense of inevitability. The October Musk spoke of was not the same October marked by calendars, pumpkin harvests, or celebrations of change in season. His October was a shift in consciousness. It was the collision point between the old world and the rising new. He spoke about it not as prediction, but as certainty, as if the timeline had already been written and was merely waiting to reveal itself. Energy grids will no longer be national, he said. They will be planetary. AI won't just write code or generate images, it will become the fabric of decision-making across governments and corporations. And space won't be for exploration anymore, it will become survival. October is when people begin to see that these are not science fiction ideas. They are the only paths forward. The words left many unsettled. Not because they were entirely unexpected, after all, Musk had hinted at these directions before, but because of the way he framed October as a convergence point, a doorway that would be impossible to close once opened. And what unsettled people even more was the sense that he wasn't exaggerating. The narrative carried with it the rhythm of inevitability. Musk was not a man who wasted words, nor one who painted fantasy for its own sake. Every phrase, every pause, every carefully placed silence seemed designed to ignite imagination while anchoring it in reality. He began to speak about the unseen preparations already underway, the projects hidden beneath the surface that most of the public had no knowledge of. He referenced satellites already orbiting Earth, forming a network capable of connecting the most remote village to the global stream of information. He referenced experiments with Neuralink that were not about luxury or novelty, but about human survival in a world where machines might outthink their creators. And then, almost with a chilling calm, he spoke of Mars, not as a dream, but as a necessity. There will be those who laugh, he said. There will be those who dismiss this as ego. But history doesn't wait for skeptics. October is when the first signals of inevitability will begin to show. Humanity is not built to remain on one planet forever. Whether we accept it or not, expansion is survival. The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged, as though the future itself had pressed into the room, heavy and undeniable. What made Musk's October revelations so powerful was not only what he said, but what he left unsaid. It was in the way he allowed gaps, letting imaginations fill in the shadows. It was in the way his tone shifted, blending the certainty of an engineer with the gravity of a prophet. People think revolutions happen overnight, he continued. They don't. They build in silence, underground, in laboratories, in boardrooms, in the minds of those who refuse to accept limits. October is not the beginning of the revolution, it's the unveiling. It's when people realize it has already been building around them, and now it's too late to stop. The air itself seemed to pulse with the words. October wasn't a countdown, it was a reveal. Humanity was already living in the shadows of transformation, it just hadn't noticed until now. The vision Musk presented was not gentle. It was disruptive, almost violent in its clarity. But it was also strangely hopeful. For within the disruption was the promise of something greater, an opportunity to rise, to expand, to finally embrace the kind of existence humanity had only dreamed of. He described technologies that sounded both thrilling and terrifying. Cities powered entirely by renewable grids that could withstand collapse. Neural networks that could accelerate medical breakthroughs beyond what governments could approve in time. Spacecraft ready to leap farther than anything in history. But it wasn't just about machinery. It was about the mindset shift required to face what was coming. Musk's October wasn't merely about unveiling technologies, it was about unveiling humanity's next stage of identity. The old story is over, he said with finality. And October is when people will finally see the page has already been turned. Outside the walls where Musk spoke, the world was still busy with its distractions, politics, entertainment, the ordinary cycle of news and noise. But inside the room, those listening began to feel as though the air was different, heavier, charged with something unseen. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he seemed to embody inevitability. Elon Musk wasn't predicting October, he was announcing it, as if he had already lived through it in his mind and was now trying to prepare the rest of the world for its arrival. And those who truly listened understood that what he was describing wasn't just technological, it was existential. October was the threshold into a world where humanity would no longer be able to hide from its own future. That was how the revelation unfolded, not as a single statement, but as a layered unveiling, like shadows pulling back to reveal something vast and unstoppable waiting behind them. And as he continued, the mystery of October grew deeper, the suspense more suffocating, until the listeners were left with the undeniable sense that something extraordinary, something irreversible, was about to begin. The hour felt longer than time itself. His words stretched into the silence, carving their way into memory, into imagination. And when he finally paused again, the pause itself felt prophetic. The truth, he said quietly, is that October isn't coming. It's already here. You just haven't seen it yet. And with that, the revelation became a riddle, one that would haunt every listener until the moment October arrived. The room seemed to vibrate with an invisible hum after Musk's last words. People leaned forward, as though the silence itself might give them a clue to what he wasn't saying out loud. He had already framed October as the point of no return, the unveiling of a future that most had not yet dared to imagine. But now, he shifted into something even more unsettling, more precise, more urgent. When I say October is already here, Musk continued, his voice calm but edged with steel, I don't mean it as a metaphor. I mean it literally. The first signs are already moving through our systems. They're hidden in the algorithms, in the data streams, in the patterns no one pays attention to. And once people realize what's happening, it will be too late to ignore. The statement cut through the air like a blade. Algorithms. Data streams. Patterns. He wasn't talking about rockets or cars anymore, he was talking about the invisible architecture of modern civilization itself, the unseen web that quietly ran everything from banking to medicine to communication. Artificial intelligence isn't coming, he said bluntly. It's here. It's been here for longer than you think. But October is when it crosses the threshold from being a tool to being a partner. Some will see this as liberation. Others will see it as a threat. The truth is, it's both. The mention of AI sent a ripple through the audience. Everyone knew Musk had warned about artificial intelligence before. He had called it more dangerous than nuclear weapons, had cautioned about its misuse. But his tone now was different. It wasn't warning, it was inevitability. He described systems already running quietly in the background, learning, evolving, shaping decisions without anyone realizing it. Systems that could predict consumer behavior with eerie precision, that could simulate political outcomes, that could even write code better than the engineers who once created them. October is when AI stops hiding, he said. Not because it wants to, but because its capabilities will no longer fit inside the box we've tried to keep it in. Governments know this. Corporations know this. What they don't know is how to control it once it grows beyond the leash. There was no drama in his tone, no attempt to exaggerate. Just fact, spoken plainly. Which made it all the more chilling. Then he shifted again, as though unveiling another hidden layer. But AI is only one piece of October. Energy is another. He spoke of power grids stretched thin, of supply chains that no longer aligned with the world's accelerating pace. He described how nations were already scrambling to prepare for blackouts, for instability, for the pressure of populations demanding more than outdated systems could provide. And then he described something else, something most people in the room had never even considered. Energy grids aren't just about electricity, he explained. They're about control. Whoever controls energy controls civilization. October is when that truth becomes impossible to deny. Old systems will fail. New ones will emerge. And the battle over that shift will define the decade ahead. The words felt heavy, not just as prediction but as a warning. For what Musk was suggesting was not just a technological upgrade, it was a battle for the very lifeblood of civilization. But even that wasn't the end. The way he moved between topics felt like stepping stones across a river, each one leading deeper into the current, closer to the heart of the unknown. And then, almost casually, he said the word that had been lingering unspoken in everyone's mind. Mars. The room tensed as though a collective breath had been held. Musk's obsession with Mars was well known, often dismissed as science fiction or ego. But the way he said it now carried none of the usual excitement, none of the grand speeches about colonization. His tone was different, darker, more pragmatic. People think Mars is an escape plan, he said. It's not. It's insurance. It's not about abandoning Earth. It's about ensuring humanity survives, even if Earth fails. October is when people begin to realize that survival isn't just an option, it's the requirement. The signals are already here. The climate data. The geopolitical instability. The fragile systems we've built. October is when denial ends. No one dared to interrupt. Because in that moment, Musk wasn't speaking as a CEO or a dreamer. He was speaking as a man who had seen the fragility of civilization more clearly than anyone else, and who was trying to tell the world, before it was too late. The suspense grew heavier, thicker, like a storm cloud gathering over the conversation. And yet, within Musk's words, there was always a flicker of hope, not soft, not sentimental, but raw, fierce hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing collapse can lead to rebirth, that endings can become beginnings if faced with courage. "Don't misunderstand me," he said firmly. "October is not doom. It's revelation. It's when the illusions finally break. People will see clearly. Some will panic. Some will adapt. Some will lead. The question is, who will you be when it happens?" That was the question that lingered, echoing through the silence. Who will you be when October arrives? The conversation turned inward. Those listening began to shift uneasily in their seats, not because they doubted him, but because they believed him. They began to think about their own lives, their jobs, their families, their routines, and how fragile it all suddenly seemed. They thought of the grids powering their homes, the algorithms shaping their feeds, the invisible systems running their world. And they realized, perhaps for the first time, that all of it could shift, suddenly, irreversibly. Musk's October wasn't about prediction, it was about awakening. As the hours passed, his revelations came like waves. Each one higher, each one pulling the listeners deeper into the tide. He spoke of governments already quietly preparing contingency plans. He spoke of private companies positioning themselves for control of resources no one even knew were being contested. He spoke of signals buried in plain sight, economic patterns, environmental data, political maneuvers, that all pointed toward the same conclusion: the old systems were crumbling. And then he spoke of what was rising to replace them. "October will be a dividing line," he said. "On one side, those who cling to the old. On the other side, those who build the new. There won't be a middle ground anymore. The future doesn't negotiate. It moves." The words carried no malice, no arrogance. Only certainty. And that certainty was enough to send chills down every spine in the room. By the time he paused again, the air felt charged, as though the room itself had become a conduit for something larger than words. No one knew exactly what would happen in October. But everyone knew, after hearing Musk, that it would not be ordinary. The revelation had begun. The atmosphere in the room had become almost electric. Musk's words weren't just information, they were signals, subtle and sharp, carrying layers of meaning beyond what could be immediately understood. Listeners began to sense that October was not a single event, but a series of thresholds, each one revealing more of the reality Musk had glimpsed long before anyone else. "Let me be clear," he said, leaning forward, his eyes scanning the room as if he could see through every doubt and hesitation. "October is when hidden preparations start to intersect with visible consequences. What's been quietly built, quietly tested, quietly positioned, will suddenly become obvious. You will see it in energy, in AI, in space technology, in communication networks. And you will see it in how people respond to change. Some will rise, some will fall." The way he spoke made it impossible to dismiss. Hidden preparations. Quietly built systems. Invisible networks. It was as if the world was a chessboard, and October was the moment when the pieces finally revealed their purpose. He paused, letting the gravity of the statement sink in. Then, with a calm intensity, he continued. Governments have already begun the quiet work of adaptation. You won't see it on the news. You won't hear about it in public statements. But they are preparing. Some for survival. Some for control. Some because they know the old systems cannot endure. October will make that obvious. And it will also show which strategies fail, which systems crumble, and which individuals, ordinary people, will find themselves in extraordinary positions. The audience shifted in their seats, the tension growing. Musk wasn't speaking hypothetically. He wasn't theorizing. He was outlining a reality that had already been set in motion, a reality where preparation, timing, and awareness would be the difference between survival and stagnation. And let me be frank, he added, his tone dropping, the transition won't be comfortable. It won't be painless. But that is the nature of evolution. Civilization is not kind to those who cling to the past. He turned to a more personal dimension, his gaze locking with those who were listening most intently. October is also about human awareness, he said. Most people are still asleep. They think life is static, predictable. They don't realize that the systems they depend on, the energy, the information, the networks, are fragile. October will wake people up. Not gently. Not with a whisper. But with undeniable reality. Musk described signals that most could not yet see, patterns in data, subtle shifts in climate, energy consumption anomalies, and AI behavior that hinted at intelligence growing beyond human control. These weren't distant possibilities, they were present and immediate, operating quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. And when people begin to notice these signals, Musk continued, they will begin to question everything they thought was permanent. The moment of awakening will be swift. It will be undeniable. And for those who are prepared, it will be exhilarating. For those who are not, it will be terrifying. Then he spoke of space again, not as an abstract dream, but as a critical step in survival. Mars, he said softly, almost reverently, is not about adventure. It is about contingency. It is the backup plan for humanity. And it's not science fiction anymore. The hardware is ready, the teams are ready, the calculations are done. October is when people will begin to see the signs, spacecraft in motion, resources allocated, strategies unfolding. And some will finally understand that our existence cannot remain confined to one planet forever. It was a chilling thought, that survival might not be guaranteed on Earth. Musk framed it matter-of-factly, as though it were the simplest of truths. The room felt colder, heavier, as though the weight of interplanetary responsibility had been laid on every listener's shoulders. And, he added, it will not be optional. October will make clear that expansion into space is not a luxury or ego project. It is a requirement. Those who understand it will thrive. Those who dismiss it will be left behind. The intensity of his revelations began to escalate. Musk spoke of hidden technologies quietly being tested, systems that could change the way humanity perceives reality, and AI platforms capable of analyzing data on a planetary scale, predicting shortages, conflicts, and opportunities before they became visible to the naked eye. Imagine an intelligence, he said, that can see the patterns humans miss, that can anticipate events before they unfold, that can guide decisions in ways we can barely imagine. This isn't coming. It's already here. October is when its influence becomes visible. And whether you accept it or not, it will begin shaping every aspect of life. His words were calm, yet they carried a force that was impossible to ignore. The revelation was not frightening for the sake of fear, it was frightening because it was real. And Musk was telling the world to notice it before it was too late. He paused for a long moment, looking out over the audience as if measuring their readiness. Then, almost conversationally, he added a detail that caught everyone off guard. And there are things you won't hear about. Things too sensitive to discuss openly. Projects that involve collaboration across nations, corporations, and even independent thinkers working quietly. These initiatives are not public, but they are active. And they will make October unforgettable. The signs are already present, if you know where to look. He didn't elaborate further, but that was enough. The room buzzed with speculation. What could these hidden projects be? How could ordinary people even perceive them? Musk didn't answer. He only allowed the implication to settle. October would reveal what had long been concealed. The final layer of his revelation focused on human readiness. This isn't just technology, he said. It's psychology. It's awareness. It's understanding that the world you take for granted is not permanent. October will test adaptability, perception, and courage. Some will rise. Some will resist. Some will fail. The difference will be preparation and insight. He framed preparation not as panic, not as fear, but as awareness, noticing subtle signals, recognizing patterns, and being willing to act decisively when the time comes. The more he spoke, the more it became clear that October was not merely a month, it was a lens through which humanity would see itself, and its capacity to survive and thrive. Those who see early, Musk continued, will become architects of the new reality. Those who do not, will be swept aside by it. There will be no exceptions. By the end of that session, the audience was quiet, not because they were confused, but because they were thinking, processing, realizing. Musk had not offered solutions, not yet. He had offered insight, a revelation of inevitability, and a challenge, to wake up, to notice, and to act. He concluded, almost softly, October is a doorway. It has always been here. It was never about chance. It is about readiness. It is about understanding the currents that are moving beneath the surface of everyday life. And if you pay attention, if you listen, if you prepare, you will not only survive October, you will thrive in the world that comes after. The words were simple. Yet in them was the weight of centuries, of civilizations, of possibilities humanity had yet to embrace. And with that, the room felt changed, as if it had collectively stepped across the threshold he described. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was recognition. The world as they knew it was about to shift, and there was no turning back. The world outside the room continued in its normal rhythm, unaware of the storm Musk described, yet inside, every listener felt as if time had slowed. October, he explained, was not simply a month, it was the point at which humanity would see the seams of its civilization begin to stretch and reveal the machinery behind everyday life. Think of October as the moment reality steps forward and announces itself, Musk said. Technologies we've been developing quietly will begin to emerge into visibility. Satellites, energy grids, AI networks, they will no longer be invisible. People will start to see the framework of the new era forming, and it will be undeniable. He spoke of breakthroughs that were on the verge of being public knowledge, yet few understood their full implications. Advanced AI would not just assist humans, it would begin to collaborate, predicting outcomes, optimizing processes, even guiding decision-making across global systems. October is when people will realize that intelligence no longer resides solely in humans, Musk said. Energy was another pillar of the revelation. Musk described cities that were quietly transitioning to resilient, self-sustaining grids, designed to withstand failures that would have crippled previous generations. Electric grids will no longer be vulnerable to outdated centralization, he explained. By October, the first signs of these new systems will become visible. They will show that energy independence isn't just theoretical, it's happening, quietly, efficiently, and without fanfare. The implications were profound. Governments and corporations had been preparing, but Musk hinted that ordinary citizens, unprepared for the speed of change, would experience sudden shifts in availability and control. Those who recognize the signs early, he said, will have access to resources that others will scramble for too late. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Then his gaze shifted upward, toward the sky. And Mars, he said, is no longer just a dream. Spacecraft are ready. Launch windows are calculated. Supplies and life support systems have been quietly tested. October will show humanity that survival beyond Earth is no longer optional, it's an imperative. The first signals of this expansion will become impossible to ignore. The room felt almost silent, though no one moved. Musk's words carried the intensity of inevitability. There was no hype, no exaggeration, only the raw clarity of a man who had been preparing for this threshold for years, and who now wanted the world to see it before it arrived. This isn't about adventure, he continued. It's about survival. And October will force humanity to confront that truth, whether people are ready or not. He shifted once more, the tone growing sharper, almost urgent. Global communications, finance, transportation, they will all experience subtle shifts that herald larger change. Some changes will be obvious. Some will go unnoticed until they cascade into systems that people rely on every day. October is the moment when these hidden changes begin to interact, creating a chain reaction of visibility and consequence. The listeners understood immediately, this wasn't chaos for its own sake. It was the natural unfolding of systems designed to adapt, evolve, and integrate technologies that had previously been hidden from view. Musk emphasized that awareness and preparation would define outcomes, not luck, not chance. He described the signs of AI becoming a partner to humanity, rather than a tool. Algorithms were already learning at rates that human minds could barely track. Systems were quietly predicting climate trends, resource availability, social behavior, and even geopolitical events. Musk explained that by October, the influence of these networks would become perceptible. People will notice patterns, he said, solutions appearing before problems fully manifest. Actions being optimized in ways that seem prescient. And some will panic, thinking it's magic. Others will understand it as evolution. Musk's narrative grew more intense as he connected the layers: energy, space, global preparedness. Each sector was independently remarkable, but together, they formed a convergence point unlike anything humanity had seen before. October, he explained, is when the convergence becomes visible. When the threads of technology, awareness, and human adaptation intersect, creating a reality that cannot be ignored. And in that intersection, people will see who is ready, and who is not. He described ordinary individuals suddenly finding themselves in positions of responsibility, capable of navigating systems that others could not. He spoke of communities that had embraced self-sufficiency and foresight thriving, while those clinging to outdated assumptions would struggle. It wasn't fear-mongering, it was clarity. This is not a test, he said. It is an unfolding of what has already been set in motion. October doesn't create the wave, it reveals it. The wave has been building beneath the surface for years. And when it rises, it will be impossible to ignore. Then, almost quietly, he spoke of something deeper, more philosophical. October will reveal the fragility of human perception, Musk said. Most people believe the world is stable, predictable. Most people believe that civilization is permanent. October will force people to see that stability is an illusion. Permanence is a myth. And that realization, though unsettling, is necessary if humanity is to rise beyond its current limitations. It was not a prediction of catastrophe, but of awakening. Musk framed it as a transformation, a moment when awareness would expand rapidly, forcing society to reconcile what was known with what was possible. He returned once again to Mars, tying it into this awakening. The first signals of humanity expanding beyond Earth will arrive quietly, he said. Launches will be subtle. Supply chains discreet. Teams working in coordination without fanfare. But the implications will be massive. People will begin to understand that civilization cannot be confined to one planet. October is when that awareness begins to penetrate. The statement hung in the air, heavier than any technical explanation. Space wasn't a dream anymore, it was a necessity. And Musk's calm, measured delivery made it clear that the preparation for this necessity was already underway. October will show humanity, he said, that the next chapter isn't just about technology. It's about perspective, awareness, and readiness to act when the signs become undeniable. Finally, Musk spoke about the subtle but powerful human elements: courage, adaptability, insight. Technology alone will not determine who thrives, he said. Awareness and action will. Those who notice the signs, who recognize patterns, who adapt quickly, these people will shape the future. October will expose those capabilities. It will reveal who can navigate the next era and who cannot. By the time he finished, the room was profoundly silent. Not because the audience was in shock, but because they had collectively absorbed something extraordinary. October was not simply a date. It was a doorway. And everyone in that room had seen a glimpse of what lay beyond. Remember this, Musk concluded, October is already here. The wave has been building. The signs are visible if you choose to see them. And the choice of awareness, preparation, and action will define the next chapter of human history. The subtle hum of anticipation hung in the air, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. Musk leaned forward, his gaze steady, his voice calm yet carrying an intensity that seemed to ripple through every listener. October, he began, will be marked by signals that most people will miss. The changes are already happening, quietly, in plain sight. The ones who notice them first will have the advantage. The ones who ignore them will be left behind. He paused for emphasis, scanning the room as if measuring the readiness of each person. These signals are not just technological, he continued. They exist in energy flows, in satellite patterns, in the behavior of artificial intelligence. They exist in shifts in supply chains, subtle fluctuations in resource availability, and even in the collective awareness of populations around the globe. October will reveal these signs unmistakably, but only if you are paying attention. Musk spoke of AI with the calm certainty of someone who had seen the future unfold step by step. AI is no longer a tool, he said. It is becoming a partner. By October, the first true collaborative systems will begin to emerge, assisting humans in ways that were previously unimaginable. Decision-making processes in corporations, governments, and research institutions will be influenced by intelligence that learns faster than we can process. It will be subtle at first, almost invisible, but its effects will grow rapidly. He leaned back slightly, letting the weight of the statement settle. People will feel it as intuition, as prescience, as solutions appearing before problems manifest. Some will be uncomfortable, some will resist. But those who understand it as evolution will thrive. And October is when that shift becomes undeniable. Energy was the next focus. Musk's tone sharpened. Look at energy, he said. Old grids are reaching their limits. October will make this visible. Failures in infrastructure will coincide with the emergence of new, resilient systems. Cities transitioning quietly to renewable, decentralized power will suddenly appear as models of stability. The contrast will be striking, and it will signal the dawn of a new era of energy management. He spoke of networks capable of withstanding crises, grids that adapt dynamically to demand, and systems that anticipate shortages before they occur. The old ways will falter, Musk said. And the new ways will be visible, undeniable, and necessary. Those who recognize and adapt will gain an advantage that goes far beyond convenience. It will determine survival, influence, and freedom. He shifted to the environmental changes that would coincide with October. You will notice subtle shifts in weather patterns, fluctuations in ecosystems, and anomalies in natural cycles, he explained. These are signals of a planet in transition. Not catastrophic, but revealing. They are reminders that humanity has responsibilities it cannot ignore. October is when these shifts become observable on a scale that commands attention. His voice softened for a moment, carrying a tone of urgency mixed with hope. These changes are not threats, they are opportunities. Opportunities to adapt, to innovate, and to take responsibility. October is the threshold when these opportunities converge with human action. And then, Mars. Musk spoke with deliberate calm, emphasizing its necessity. The preparations for Mars are already underway. Launches are scheduled, life support systems tested, and strategies refined. October will reveal the first subtle signs of this interplanetary expansion. It will be evident in supply movements, in strategic allocations, and in the quietly coordinated efforts across organizations and nations. People will start to realize that humanity cannot remain on one planet indefinitely. Expansion is not luxury, it is survival. The audience felt the weight of his words. Musk wasn't speaking of adventure or ego. He was speaking of contingency, of foresight, of human destiny. Those who understand this early will shape the next stage of civilization. Those who ignore it will be caught unprepared. The hidden signals Musk referenced were layered and complex. He described satellites that would begin to show anomalies in real-time data, AI platforms that would start offering solutions with speed and precision humans could barely match, and energy networks that would begin demonstrating resilience and self-correction in subtle ways. These are not coincidences, Musk said. They are the markers of a future that has already been set in motion. October is when the patterns align and become observable. Pay attention. Notice the shifts. Understand the consequences. He emphasized that these signs were often subtle and easily overlooked. Ordinary citizens might perceive them as anomalies or coincidences. But the trained observer, the one prepared, aware, and attentive, would see the emergence of an entirely new system, a system quietly redefining the rules of human civilization. Musk also touched on human adaptability. Technology alone will not define the outcome, he said. It is human response, perception, and action that will determine who thrives. October is the ultimate test of readiness. Those who anticipate, adapt, and act decisively will influence the direction of civilization. Those who cling to old assumptions will be swept aside. He described individuals who would suddenly find themselves in positions of influence, able to navigate complex systems because they had been paying attention to hidden signals. Communities that had adopted foresight and self-reliance would flourish. Societies that ignored patterns would struggle. October is a revelation of readiness, Musk said. Not luck. Not chance. Awareness and action. Then he spoke of the subtle interplay between technology and perception. By October, Musk said, people will begin to notice solutions appearing before problems fully materialize. They will sense changes in energy distribution, AI-guided logistics, and communication systems that seem prescient. Some will panic, some will resist, but those who understand it as evolution will thrive. The world will feel different, and it will be real. He emphasized that this transformation would be gradual yet undeniable. October would act as the lens, revealing the hidden architecture of civilization and the subtle shifts guiding humanity into the next era. Finally, Musk's tone became almost philosophical. October will challenge assumptions, confront complacency, and test courage. It will reveal human adaptability, intelligence, and resilience. The signs are everywhere, if one knows where to look. Awareness, preparation, and decisive action are the tools that will define survival and success. October is not about fear, it is about awakening. He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. The audience was silent, each person processing the magnitude of what he had described. Technology, energy, AI, Mars, human readiness, all converging in a month that would reveal the unseen currents shaping civilization. Remember, Musk said, almost whispering, October is already here. The wave has been building beneath the surface. The signs are visible if you choose to see them. Awareness and action will define the future. The room was heavy with anticipation, every listener holding their breath as Musk's words cut through the air like a pulse. October, he said, was no longer just a month, it was the manifestation of systems, technologies, and human awareness converging into a reality that could no longer be ignored. By now, Musk began, his voice steady yet urgent, you should understand that October is not about speculation. It's not about marketing or hype. It's the culmination of processes that have been quietly building for years. Hidden systems, AI networks, energy grids, space operations, they are all intersecting, creating a reality that is immediate, tangible, and irreversible. He paused, scanning the room, letting the magnitude of his statement settle. Some of you will see this and act. Some will hesitate. Some will ignore it entirely. But October will move forward regardless of belief. That is the nature of reality, it does not negotiate. It does not wait. It simply unfolds. The conversation turned inward, asking the listeners to consider not just technology, but their own preparedness. Musk emphasized that the signals leading into October were everywhere, but subtle. Satellite anomalies, AI-guided predictions, shifts in energy distribution, and even environmental patterns, all of them were indicators of the larger wave of transformation. The difference between those who thrive and those who falter, he said, is attention. Awareness. Action. Those who notice patterns, interpret them correctly, and act decisively will shape the next era. Those who ignore them will find themselves reacting too late. October is the clarifying moment. He described individuals who had already begun to act on hidden signals, quietly building communities, testing self-sustaining energy solutions, preparing for Mars, and embracing AI as a partner rather than a tool. These people were already adapting to a future others could barely perceive.